It had been years since I visited the lake house. Life had a way of pulling me away. College, work, relationships. I hadn't been back since my parents sold it, but when I got the call from the real estate agent saying it had been foreclosed and was sitting empty, I felt an odd pull to return. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was something else. I told myself it would be a quick trip, just a weekend to check on the place, grab anything worth keeping, and leave. The house sat at the edge of a secluded lake deep in the woods, miles from any town. It had always been a quiet place, almost unnervingly so. Even as a kid, the silence felt heavier here, like the air itself was watching. I arrived late in the afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. The house stood just as I remembered. 2 stories, peeling white paint, a porch swing that creaked in the wind. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of old wood and dust hit me, mixed with something else, something faintly human. I told myself I was imagining it. I spent the first hour walking through the house, reacquainting myself with its creaks and quirks. The furniture was still here, old, covered in sheets, abandoned like a forgotten memory. The silence pressed in, heavier than I remembered. I made my way upstairs to my old room. The door creaked as I pushed it open. My bed was still there, the same worn-out comforter, the same wooden dresser, but something was off. The sheets were crumpled, as if someone had been sleeping in them. My skin prickled. I knew I hadn't been here in years. No one should have been. I swallowed, trying to push down the unease. Maybe an animal had gotten in somehow, though I saw no sign of fur or droppings. Maybe I had left the bed like that the last time I was here. But deep down, I knew better. That night, as I settled into the dusty couch downstairs, the house felt alive in a way it shouldn't have. The wind howled outside, the branches scraping against the windows like fingers. Then I heard it. Footsteps, upstairs, slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. I sat frozen, ears straining. The steps creaked across the floorboards, moving from room to room. Then silence. I gripped the flashlight beside me and stood, my legs heavy with dread. Step by step, I climbed the staircase, the old wood groaning beneath me. I reached the top and hesitated. The hallway was empty. I checked my room first. The sheets were undisturbed, exactly as I had left them. I checked the closet, under the bed, nothing. A chill crept over my skin. I turned to leave. Then I heard it, the same footsteps, but now they were coming from downstairs. I stood at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding. The sound was slow, heavy, like boots against wood. I forced myself to move, descending each step carefully, flashlight trembling in my hand. The living room was empty. The kitchen was dark and silent. I checked the doors, all still locked. The house held its breath. I exhaled shakily, running a hand through my hair. I was imagining things, I had to be. But I still locked my bedroom door that night, and I didn't sleep. The next morning, the lake was eerily still, reflecting the gray sky like a sheet of glass. I told myself I would leave early, pack up a few things and go. But before I could, I noticed something. The sheets on my bed were crumpled again. Not just crumpled, different. As if someone had laid there overnight. I hadn't touched them. I backed out of the room, my breath coming fast. And then from downstairs, a creak, a footstep. Someone was in the house. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a rusted fireplace poker, and stepped into the hallway. Silence. I made my way to the staircase, heart hammering. I took the steps slowly, trying not to make a sound. The air felt thick, heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. At the bottom of the stairs, I stopped. The living room was empty. The kitchen, empty. But the back door was open, the door that I knew I had locked. It swung slightly in the morning breeze, the air from outside creeping in like fingers against my skin. Whoever had been in the house was gone. I should have left right then. I should have grabbed my keys and driven away. But something kept me there. A pull I couldn't explain. I needed to check the attic. I hadn't gone up there yet. It was a stupid idea, but some part of me knew. Whatever was happening, the attic held the answer. The pull-string light flickered as I climbed into the attic, dust swirling in the dim glow. The air smelled of mildew and old wood. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, relics of a forgotten past. And then I saw it. A makeshift bed, a pile of blankets, a half-burned candle, a notebook. Someone had been living here. I swallowed hard, picking up the notebook with trembling fingers. The pages were filled with messy, frantic handwriting, dates, scribbled notes. They don't know I'm here. I watch them sleep. I hear them moving downstairs when I'm up here. I hear them upstairs when I'm downstairs. The house is speaking to me. The last entry sent ice through my veins. I am not alone in here. A breath, not mine, behind me. I turned, my heart stopping. A shadow, tall and thin, standing at the attic entrance, grinning. The last thing I heard before the light went out was the sound of footsteps. Too many footsteps, coming from every direction. We needed a break. City life had been grinding us down. Work, stress, the endless noise. So when my friend Mike found a cheap rental for a long weekend at an old lake house, it seemed perfect. A chance to get away, drink a little too much, sit by the fire, and forget about deadlines and alarms. The listing described it as a rustic retreat on a secluded lake, ideal for peace and quiet. It sounded too good to be true. And maybe it was. We arrived just as the sun was setting. The drive had been long, winding through dense forest until the trees finally opened up, revealing the still, black surface of the lake. The house itself was old but sturdy. 2 stories, weathered wooden siding, a wraparound porch that overlooked the water. The air smelled crisp, fresh, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. "This is it?" Sarah asked, stepping out of the car and stretching. "It's kinda creepy." "That's the charm," Mike grinned, tossing his bag over his shoulder. Danny, always the skeptic, looked up at the darkened windows. "Looks abandoned." The place did have a strange, forgotten feeling, like it had been sitting empty for years, waiting, but we were too excited to care. We grabbed our bags, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Dust, damp wood, and something faintly metallic, like rust or old blood. The second thing was the silence. Even the wind outside had died down, leaving only the soft creak of the floor beneath our feet. The first night was easy. We unpacked, made dinner, and cracked open beers by the fire. Outside, the lake was eerily still, reflecting the moon like a sheet of black glass. There were no birds, no frogs, no usual night sounds, just quiet. We tried not to let it get to us. "You know, some of these old places have weird histories," Danny said, poking at the fire. "I read about a house like this once. Guy went missing, just vanished one night. They found his boots by the dock, but that was it." "Not the time for ghost stories, man," Sarah muttered, pulling her hoodie tighter around her. Mike laughed. "Come on, it's a rental. What's the worst that could happen?" The first strange thing happened that night. I woke up around 3 a.m., throat dry, craving water. As I made my way to the kitchen, I passed by the living room. That's when I noticed the front door was unlocked. I frowned, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. I knew we had locked it. I remembered checking before going to bed. I stepped closer, peering outside. The lake stretched into darkness, the trees swaying gently in the wind that I hadn't heard before. And then, just at the edge of the porch, I saw them, footprints. Wet, muddy prints leading from the dock to the front door, but none leading away. The next morning, I told the others. "You probably forgot to lock it," Danny said, yawning. Mike shrugged. Maybe the last renters left those prints. Sarah didn't say anything. She just stared at the door, chewing on her lip. The day passed without incident. We hiked, swam, pretended everything was normal. But that night, the noises started. At first they were soft, faint creaks, the sound of shifting wood. Houses settle, we told ourselves. But then came the footsteps. I was lying in bed when I heard them, slow, deliberate steps coming from downstairs. I sat up, heart hammering. The others were asleep. The footsteps moved through the living room, past the kitchen, then silence. I grabbed my phone, crept to my door, and peeked out into the dark hallway. Nothing. And then, a soft knock on the bedroom door. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. Another knock, slow, deliberate. I reached for the doorknob, holding my breath, and then, nothing. The knocking stopped. I stood there, heart racing, listening. The silence stretched on and on. Eventually, I forced myself back to bed. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I wasn't the only one who had heard it. "I heard someone walking around," Sarah said, her face pale. Mike nodded, rubbing his arms. "I swear I heard the door open last night." We checked the front door. Still locked, but the footprints were back. This time they led from the dock to the side of the house, right beneath our bedroom windows. That night, we locked every door, every window. We barricaded the entrance with chairs, anything to keep whatever it was out. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was already inside. The noises started at midnight. A single creak, then another. Something moving upstairs. I held my breath, gripping my phone. I checked our group chat. Everyone was in their rooms. So who was walking around? I opened my door slowly, the hallway stretching before me in darkness. A shadow moved at the end of the hall. Tall, thin, not one of us. I ducked back inside, heart racing. Then the footsteps changed direction. Now they were coming downstairs, toward the living room, toward Mike. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking, and typed, "Mike, wake up, someone's in the house." No response. Then, from below, a single sharp scream. We ran. We didn't stop to pack, didn't stop to check. We tore through the house, through the woods, back to the car. The lake house stood behind us, silent, watching. Mike was gone. No footprints. No sign of a struggle. Just gone. The cops didn't believe us. "There's no one there," they said when they checked the house. No sign of forced entry. They didn't see the footprints by the dock. They didn't see the door unlocked. They didn't hear the footsteps upstairs when you were downstairs, or the footsteps downstairs when you were upstairs. But we did. And sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear them, coming closer. The storm had come out of nowhere. One second, I was driving down a quiet back road, my only company the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle from the radio. The next, the sky had turned an angry shade of gray, rain hammering against the windshield so hard I could barely see the road. Then my car sputtered. The dashboard lights flickered, the engine coughed once, twice, then died completely. I swore under my breath, coasting to a stop on the muddy roadside. The wind howled through the trees lining the road, the storm making the world feel smaller, more isolated. I pulled out my phone, no signal, perfect. That's when I saw it. A house. It was barely visible through the trees, sitting at the edge of a black, motionless lake. The place looked old, 2 stories, warped wooden siding, a sagging roof, but it was shelter. And I didn't have much of a choice. I grabbed my bag and made my way toward it, my footsteps squelching in the mud. As I got closer, the house loomed larger, its windows dark, its porch rotting with age. Something about it felt wrong, but the storm was getting worse, and I needed a place to stay. The door was unlocked. It creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a dim interior coated in dust. The air smelled damp, like old wood and mildew. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the silence. Nothing. The house had clearly been abandoned for years. Cobwebs clung to the corners. Furniture sat draped in white sheets, and the fireplace was cold. Still, it was better than sleeping in my car. I found a couch in what looked like the old living room, dusted it off as best as I could, and settled in for the night. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The storm howled outside, and somewhere in the house, something creaked. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but something was standing over me. A boy. No older than 10, barefoot, his clothes ragged and soaked with lake water. His skin was pale, almost gray, his hair matted, but it was his eyes that scared me the most. Wide, hollow, terrified. He shook me violently, whispering in a voice barely above a breath, "Wake up, you have to hide now." I sat up, my heart hammering. What's going on?" The boy grabbed my wrist, cold fingers digging into my skin. "He's coming, you have to hide." "Who's coming?" But the boy just shook his head violently, eyes darting toward the hallway. And that's when I heard it. Heavy footsteps, coming from upstairs, slow, deliberate. Someone or something was in the house. I shot up, my breath caught in my throat. The boy pushed me toward the kitchen, his small hands strong despite his frail frame. "The cabinet," he whispered. "Get inside, don't make a sound." I didn't argue. I scrambled into the cabinet beneath the sink, my body barely fitting inside. The boy shut the door just as the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Then the house fell silent. I held my breath. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the house, it was dead quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat, too loud, threatening to give me away. Then, a deep inhale, like something sniffing the air. I pressed my hand over my mouth, forcing myself not to breathe. The floorboards groaned as something moved through the room, slow, searching. I could see through a crack in the cabinet door. Boots, old, waterlogged boots, dripping lake water onto the floor. The thing wearing them wasn't human. Its legs were wrong, too long, too thin, moving with an unnatural, jerking motion. Then it spoke. Not in a normal voice. No, this was something else. Low, guttural, like a voice being dragged across broken glass. "Where are you hiding?" The boots stopped right in front of the cabinet. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then, something scratched against the wood. Slow, deliberate, almost playful. I bit down on my lips so hard I tasted blood. The thing chuckled. Then it turned away. I heard it shuffle toward the front door, the sound of something heavy dragging behind it. The air felt lighter, like the house itself was exhaling. Then, a wet, squelching sound, and the boy screamed. I waited. I don't know how long I stayed in that cabinet, shaking, every nerve screaming at me to run. Finally, when the silence stretched long enough, I forced myself to move. The kitchen was empty. But the front door was wide open. Cold air rushed in from outside. The storm had stopped. The world was too still. And the boy was gone. I stepped outside, my breath curling in the freezing air. The lake was silent, its surface smooth, undisturbed. Then I saw them. Footprints, leading from the house to the water. But there were only one set of footprints. The boy's footprints weren't there. It had only been him. The thing that had dragged him away, it left no prints at all. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the road, until I saw the first headlights in the distance. I never looked back. But even now, I still see the boy's face when I close my eyes. Still hear his whisper in my dreams. "Wake up, you have to hide." Because I know deep down that whatever took him is still out there, still waiting.